Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is the story about Naruto. What if Naruto married with Ino Yamanaka? Part 21. Hope you'll enjoy this video. So before we start, please do support for more awesome content and also hit the subscribe button and share this video with your friends. And also support the creator of this fanfic. I have created a playlist where you can find out all the previous parts of this video, link in the description, and check out the other video as well. So let's start the video. As a sign of faith, we have removed those who would dishonor you by demanding money and wounding your comrades. If you decide to help us in our cause, then we shall help you, as it is needed. If you decline, then we lose a vaunted ally. The phrasing was so odd. The message, of course, was clear, but who exactly where they were? Why were they approaching Tsunade of all people like this, in secret? It just didn't make any sense. Still, Ino forced a message to the back of her mind, focusing on the conversation. Tsunade was saying something, which Ino couldn't tell since the wind had kicked up and was now carrying the words away from her once more. The figure responded softly with something that sounded like very well, but she couldn't swear to it. Then her eyes, trained to detect high-speed movement, saw the figure dart away into the night. Ino waited another moment, then quietly slipped away, needing to discuss this with her two teammates. Tsunade was in a foul mood when she finally entered the inn, mainly because she had been denied access to her favorite gambling centers because of her debt. Then she'd been forced to deal with a fool that assumed she was a working girl, he'd recover in a few months, so she didn't feel too bad. Then after a night of drinking and sourly thinking about the three she was traveling with, a mysterious person had approached her. They had dressed like an old-style Anbu, though the face mask reminded her more of a mist hunter nin. They were slight, and though they were talented, obviously only nin level. Tsunade guessed it was more a matter of speech than anything, that they had been a young male, maybe 14 or 15 years old. His message weighed heavily on her mind, though there were only a few key phrases that jumped out at her. Within Konoha, we lack unity, your aid in helping us to achieve this goal. If you decline, then we lose a vaunted ally. She had only heard of unity in passing upon her return, no real details, but this unsettled her. To make such an approach was not something anyone would have expected, plus there was the underlying threat implied in that last line. Tsunade had of course declined the offer, she was a Sannin, and she wasn't afraid. Besides, if they did move against her, she could potentially gain more information. Whoever they sent would be strong, though they would most likely underestimate her, as most male ninja did, but by fighting him, she would be able to figure out who he really was. Of course, that was a large gamble considering the handicaps she was under, an overrated team, and her fear of blood. Dried blood she could handle. If she was truly enraged enough, she could even handle fresh blood, provided she didn't notice it getting on her. Still, the die was cast, and she would handle things as they fell. Staring up the stairs, she was left with only one real problem: Naruto. Uzumaki Naruto, who had set her into this position because of his sheer desire and determination to be Hokage, had so forcibly reminded Tsunade of her important people. Naruto, the son of the Yondaime Hokage who she had encouraged to take the job, who also happened to be a Jinchuriki. Tsunade still couldn't believe it after all of Yondaime's speeches about how immoral and wrong it was to condemn children to such a fate, his violent reaction to hearing that Suna had created one that he would in turn make his own. Obviously it was the Kyuubi no Yoko that Naruto held in check that granted him that taijutsu of regeneration. Tsunade wasn't even sure what she could do or say. Who else knew? Jiraiya would obviously know, perhaps Anko, but not his teammates. Tsunade felt that even Naruto might have only recently learned of his status. Should she bring it up with him? But the discussion would lead into dangerous territory about the nature of Jinchuriki and how they were treated. Shaking her head, Tsunade resolved to leave the matter alone for the moment, and she would talk with Jiraiya first. Reaching the hallway, she came to a stop, spotting the boy that had been occupying her thoughts leaning against a wall outside his room. He had those eyes fixed on her, and even in this dim hallway, Tsunade knew he wouldn't miss anything she did. "You're up," Tsunade said, casually walking to the door to her room. "We need to talk." "You know," Tsunade drawled, eyeing the blonde in the dark hallway. "I think idiots who let their teammates get hurt should be seen and not heard." "We got hurt," Naruto countered in a tight voice, "because we were guarding your money, Baba." Tsunade shook her head, not even willing to get worked up over such a comment. The boy was young, brash, and didn't know his ass from a hole in the ground, despite what people thought. "Who are the Kiri no Shinobigatana Nanan and Shu?" Naruto asked after a moment of silence, eyes almost glowing in the dim light of the hallway. An elite group of mist swordsmen. Mamachi Zabuza, Hashigaki Kisame, Kurasuke Raiga, Yasashijai Saribi, Uchijini Tenbatsu, Yamanhachi, and Gasei Make. Each one is Junin level, and the 5 surviving members are A rank or higher missing ninja. Tsunade answered with a sigh, crossing her arms and resigned to answering such pointless questions. Okay, Naruto said slowly, eyeing Tsunade closely, tell me about Isaribi. Is that the name of the one you guys fucked up against? Tsunade asked with a snort, then seeing Naruto's glare shook her head. He's called the elegant monster of the mist, and he used to use a dao, but changed to the Naginata. But that's not a sword. You know, I remember someone else saying that. They were the 3rd candidate for the Yondaime Hokage title, and the guy mentioned that Isaribi wasn't a swordsman since he used it. Isaribi flayed him like a fish. Huh, so if he's so strong then why the hell are you giving us a hard time? Naruto asked curtly and a tad forcefully if he can fill it a Hokage candidate. I think 2 Chunin and a genin driving him off is a big deal. First off, Tsunade said glaring at him, he was not actively seeking to kill you 3. Second, you were the only one that drove him away, the others lost to his Mizu Bunshin, who is 1/10 of his strength. In other words, they were pushovers, but that doesn't matter since he will be focusing on you from now on. He mentioned we'd met again, Naruto said blandly. Met? Once he meets someone he can't kill, he starts obsessing, he goes to any length to kill them, and the longer he goes without killing them, the worse he gets. Shit, Naruto exclaimed in surprise. Tsunade continued darkly, ignoring that outburst, and finally, when the Sannin were your age we could have killed him easily. Well, we're not you, Naruto countered just as darkly as Team 10. I'll admit that it wasn't my best fight ever, but the next time I face him, he won't walk away. You keep telling yourself that, and maybe one day, it'll be true, Tsunade said, opening her door, glaring at him, but probably only after you've lost your whole team. Keep that in mind, little boy, a hero is only a hero because he's gotten everyone else killed. Is that what you think, Baba? Naruto asked thickly, anger rich in his voice. So you're saying all those important people of yours got people killed? You don't get it, Tsunade started angrily, before being cut off. I get things fine, Naruto shouted, his eyes narrowing. You're a cold-hearted, self-righteous bitch hag. You think a hero gets everyone killed? Do you think Hokage is a joke? You're not only insulting me, but everyone you ever loved that dreamed of being Hokage. Tsunade almost recoiled from the hostility in his voice, the sheer loathing in his tone. Of course she wanted to object, but for a moment she felt as if Dan and Nawaki were shouting at her. Calling her those names, telling her the same thing as Naruto was shouting. Recovering, Tsunade prepared to shout back, but found the hallway empty, just her and the cursed necklace she wore. It felt like a boulder around her neck, and reaching up the Sannin clutched it tightly. After a moment's deliberation she pulled it off, crying, realizing that it was not hers to wear. Naruto had shown just how deeply being Hokage meant to him, his spirit echoing too loudly of Dan and her younger brother. This would be the last time she entrusted this necklace to anyone. When Naruto died, then the necklace went with him. Tsunade would not be able to bear the weight of the curse after that. Turning, she opened the door and stepped inside. By the morning she would have recovered her veneer of disdain. As she lay on her futon that night, she cried for her lost family. Naruto landed adroitly on the rooftop, mind awash in the various pieces of information that he now possessed. Glancing around, he noted that Shino was the only one present, but that he appeared absorbed with his bugs. That meant Shino had found something, and Ino had gone to investigate, giving Naruto a moment to think about what he had learned. Sitting down on the rooftop, Naruto crossed his arms, scowling. He didn't really understand that hag's problem, who went around spouting about how a hero got others killed. She was seriously fucked up in the head if she thought like that. A hero didn't get others killed, he stopped others from being killed. His scowl deepened as he thought more and more about that conversation. He had meant every word. Still, he couldn't help but wonder what was up with that hag. Shaking it off, he instead turned to the facts he had learned about the man that had attacked them yesterday, Yasashijai Saribi. Naruto felt almost excited at the thought of having such a person trying to kill him. It proved Naruto was strong, but he could already see the downside. A man that got obsessed the longer he went without killing his target? Oh yeah, that was a good thing for a future Hokage to have. There was no telling when that bastard would show back up. Still, at least now he knew how to at least help Ino accept her defeat. An A rank missing ninja was not something any of them should be facing. adding that, along with his own defeat, should at least help Ino get over the loss. Though he was still unclear as to why she had freaked out on him earlier during the Cage Bunshin training. Scowling even more, the Chunin thought long and hard about certain things she had said. I saw you die, I killed you. The memory of your face at the moment of death. It was like a bolt of lightning struck him as he realized the problem. His Cage Bunshin had looked like him, so she was upset because of seeing his face as he died. Obviously, Naruto realized that Ino didn't like seeing him hurt. He remembered the forest of death, the concern she had shown for him being hurt after his fight against that snake bastard. Hadn't she said that he was more important than Sasuke? Hence, if she cared that much about him being hurt, seeing him die would have to be horrible. He sat there, utterly surprised at such a concept. Then he tried to play it off or talk it around so that he was just overthinking things, but no, it was obvious now. She considered him important enough that even seeing his Cage Bunshin die was enough to upset her. I'm back, Ino suddenly said, and Naruto jerked, almost falling over at her silent arrival. Ino didn't seem to notice as she moved to sit down with them, her eyes hard. There was no hint of her normal attitude, which told him that whatever she had learned was serious. What did you learn? Shino asked, apparently rejoining the conversation. The boy's name is Haku. Ino said he's working with someone named Zabuza. I didn't have much time since he started waking up as soon as I entered his mind, so I had to get out of there. Zabuza? Naruto repeated, mind flashing to the names Tsunade had told him. No, that would be too much of a coincidence. That would only happen with an author that just didn't care about being called uncreative. Yeah, Ino said with a slight nod. At least we now have names, Shino offered, before a soft buzz filled the air. Perhaps Ino should tell us once more of the message she overheard between Tsunade-sama and this Haku. As a sign of faith, we have removed those who would dishonor you by demanding money and wounding your comrades. If you decide to help us in our cause, then we shall help you, as it is needed. If you decline, then we lose a vaunted ally. Is that everything? Naruto asked, frowning slightly. That's all I could hear, Ino admitted with a frown, which isn't much, but still. Obviously the meeting is strange, Shino allowed, nodding slightly that the last line is obviously a threat on her life. Huh, you sure? Naruto asked, glancing at the boy curiously. Considering the nature of the message and the timing of the meeting, yes. Damn it, Naruto grumbled before looking at Ino. Okay, so what about the messenger himself, what he'd look like? I couldn't see much, and obviously I didn't get too close when I entered his mind, but he looked a lot like the Anbu. Fuck, Naruto whispered, eyes widening. Admittedly, he was not the most brilliant of people, but he could connect the dots. An Anbu, meeting Tsunade alone, making that kind of offer? It screamed unity. What is it? Ino asked, startled, blinking. Unity, Naruto said, glancing between them. Then seeing the lack of response, explained it started just before our Chunin exams. The daimyo was making a state visit to the country, and he was hanging out in Kyoto, where this group called Unity tried to assassinate him. So that's why you were so alert in Entoto, Shino said. Yeah, so anyway, Unity is made up of mostly Anbu, with some normal Chunin. Other than that, the only thing I know about them is that they recognize each other by a hand sign. What hand sign? A basic variation on the all-together sign, Naruto supplied, demonstrating briefly, quoting Anko exactly. Most hand signs are common sense, used in small squads. So, of course, Unity would use a common one. Who would notice a slight variation? This isn't good, Ino said after a moment, chewing her fingernail. Anbu and Chunin? If Tsunade-Abasan turned them down, and they really are going to try and kill her, how are we supposed to stop them? We allow them to ambush us, Shino answered, that is the best strategy, considering the various unknown factors. Say what? Ino asked, eyes wide. Shinobi Rule 59, Shino explained softly, a true shinobi can turn any ambush or trap against the one who initiated it. Ah, Ino said, turning to Naruto, smirking, so what's the plan? Naruto crossed his arms, thinking deeply for several long minutes on the situation. Those guys were definitely going to be going after Tsunade, but she was a Sannin, so she could probably handle it. However, knowing what little he did of Anbu, her age, and the fact that she was related to Ino, it would be best not to risk her life. Okay, Naruto said finally, grinning, this is what we'll do. Haku watched in silence as the group, located in a small clearing just off the main road, finished their lunch and set out once more, the undercurrents obvious to his well-trained eye. The Aburum was a walking point, but obviously focusing inward too much. The target was walking with a glacial silence, glaring at the orange-clad boy who was bickering with the blonde girl wearing the sword. They were all oblivious to the shadow following them, preparing to cut off their retreat when the ambush occurred. They were about 5 miles out from the city and, as predicted, they were taking routes not normally traveled, where sources of water were far less plentiful. It was a shame they did not know that there had been an isolated storm ahead last night. Following silently, Haku felt disappointed by Tsunade's decision. She had a good heart, and it was a shame they would have to kill her now. As a medic, Tsunade would have been invaluable to Konoha in the upcoming turmoil, and if it were up to him, Haku would try to reason with her. It wasn't up to him though, so it would be a shame when Zabuza killed her, but she really had left them with no other choice. Sensing something moving swiftly at him from ahead, Haku dropped back and then dodged further out of range to avoid a swarm of bugs on patrol. Apparently, the Aburum wasn't quite as inattentive as he had first thought, but the bugs retreated and Haku moved back into a better position. Glancing at the team, he smiled behind his mask, seeing the others sending silent but obvious signals to each other. So they were suspicious. Good, they really were ninja then. Not that it would matter, ahead he could see the markers Zabuza-sama had placed for him. The ambush would start in a few moments, Zabuza would attack from ahead, and Haku would cut off the retreat. They would be dead, and Haku could continue helping Zabuza-sama. Readying his needles, the teen came to a stop high in a tree and crouched on the tree branch. It would be any moment now, and he selected his target point for Tsunade and the blonde girl closest to her. He silently offered a prayer of remorse to the gods and promised to end things peacefully for both of them. The veins in the neck would be best, easiest to hit, and the quickest to end things. Ino could feel her nerves screaming at her, accurately aware of the ninja that had been trailing them stopping. The jaws of the ambush were closing, and it was taking all of her training to continue acting normal. Ino just hoped that this plan wouldn't blow up in their faces. After all, it was counting a lot on their just being too ninja and their overconfidence. Still, it was Naruto, and he came up with good plans. Though Ino in this case had doubts about the logic of this one, Ino would be responsible for handling Haku, while Naruto and Shino handled Zabuza. Even with Naruto's explanation about taking Tsunade's criticism with a grain of salt, since the guy they had fought was an A-rank missing ninja, having her famous aunt bad-mouthing her skills was not conducive to her confidence. Ino was jolted out of her thoughts as she felt Tsunade grab the back of her outfit and pull her back as a massive blade spiraled through the air. Ino watched the arc of the blade, surprised at the speed it was traveling. Then, with a resounding thud, it sank into a thick tree, and a moment later a tall man, wearing only loose pants and heavy books, landed on the handle. Zabuza. With a simple hop, he flipped backward, pulling the sword free as he descended. Landing, he turned, the massive weapon coming around to rest casually across his bare shoulders, staring at them with cold eyes from over the bandages around the lower half of his face. Ino couldn't help but feel a tiny shiver as she realized this man was a killer through and through. "Tsunade," the man said in a cold, unrefined voice, "how nice to finally meet you. Are you Mamachi Zabuza of the Kiri no Shinobigatana Nananinshu?" Naruto asked, moving between the group to try and stare down the man. "Heh, well informed for a ninja wannabe," the killer said, his attention shifting to Naruto. "By the way, that's a nice trick with the bunshin there." Naruto tensed, and Ino felt a wave of killer intent from Naruto wash over her. The Kenjutsu user couldn't help but shiver. She hated the feeling it gave her around Naruto. Still, further thoughts were cast aside as a flurry of darts flew towards her, and Ino reacted without thinking. Her sword cleared the scabbard, deflecting them expertly, and then shifting her grip to a two-handed hold, Ino darted into the trees. The boy in question, wearing a mask with a stylized flame, moved back in response while throwing more senbon needles, but Ino's Kodachi gracefully deflected them. A moment later she reached the tree line and hurtled up the branches toward him. Now that she was moving, in the thick of battle, there was no more doubt. Reaching the same branch as her attacker, she made a quick thrust at his mask, but he dodged back, a kunai appearing in hand. Following nimbly, Ino gave chase, driving him back, her Kodachi scraping against the kunai repeatedly. Then suddenly Haku stopped retreating and went on the offensive. Ino brought her Kodachi around, knocking his attack aside. It was a testimony to the skill of both when they spun in unison on the branch and came back around for another exchange. Ino lunged forward, blade aimed at his stomach, but had it deflected to the side. Haku followed that up by making his own slash at her face, forcing Ino to bend back, allowing the kunai to pass inches from her face. Regaining her proper posture, Ino whipped her sword around in an attempt to slice the boy in half. Instead, Haku nimble jumped off the branch, rebounding off a series of branches heading for the ground. Cursing, Ino jumped off the branch, channeling chakra into her sword, reinforcing it as she brought it overhead. Haku reached the ground a second before her and then looked up, raising his kunai to block her blow. Ino smirked and yelled, the Kodachi beginning its downward arc. Haku seemed to realize the danger and dodged back at the last second, a shrill shearing noise, followed by a deep rumble filling the air. Standing from her crouched position, Ino felt a slightly light head but couldn't stop her grin. At her feet was a sliced-in-half kunai and a deep gouge from where her sword had bit into the ground. Looking up, she found the masked boy standing perfectly still, his attention focused on her completely. Slowly, carefully, he produced a new kunai, head tilting slightly, as if giving her serious thought. That was when Ino felt the first rush of excitement. Someone was finally taking her as a serious threat. Somebody was afraid of her, Yamanaka Ino. Slipping her left foot back, settling her weight evenly, she raised her Kodachi edge up along the side of her cheek. A brief surge of chakra to her legs, she shot forward, a sharp thrust toward Haku's mask. The kunai came up, scraping against the blade, before locking against a handguard and blade. Dropping her weight slightly, Ino shoved his back, eyes narrowing in concentration. Haku darted forward, a rapid series of exchanges in a matter of moments, leaving Ino almost overwhelmed. Was it her, or was the guy getting faster? Lunging for his stomach, the boy managed to sidestep her blade and counter with a kick to her right knee. Ino went with the momentum and rolled to her feet before twisting around, her Kodachi deflecting the kunai. Regaining her feet, slipping her left foot back, and holding the blade angled toward the solar plexus, Ino waited for his next move. Haku was fast as Sasuke, maybe even faster. The boy darted forward once more, another kunai in hand, but Ino deflected the weapon aside and then down before side-kicking him in the head. Haku flipped back from the blow but managed to plant a hand on the ground and flip around to rebound off a tree and land in a crouching stance. Ino almost growled in frustration. This was getting nowhere fast. He had her beat in speed, but her skill neutralized it. A standoff. Then Haku shot forward, two kunai in hand this time. Ino pulled her Kodachi around quickly, slashing at his midsection, only to have him hook his right blade under hers while spinning to his right. The obvious thing, if Ino had been weaker or undertrained, would be for her to release the weapon. Instead, she spun with the momentum, the Kodachi escaping the kunai, allowing her to spin around and catch his free wrist. Her Kodachi coming back around, Ino prepared to make an attack but had to dodge back as the second kunai came back toward her ribs. A few simple acrobatics moved her out of the path of the two kunai as they came at her before skidding to a halt. Looking up, Ino stared at her opponent, surprised to find him breathing heavily. A rush of pride flooded through her. She was handling this. She was equal to an Anbu. Then it shattered when the boy spoke. You are very talented. However, I am afraid you are unable to defeat me. Huh? Ino asked, a sense of dread filling her. It trained in this area last night. Haku said calmly, before flashing through a series of one-handed seals. Moments later, a hail of razor-sharp needles made of water assaulted Ino, prompting her to channel chakra along her blade and unleash a tornado to scatter the needles. The boy was undaunted, however, as he began forming more one-handed seals. Even more water took to the air, taking the shape of several large mirrors as they surrounded Ino. Eyes wide, Ino felt her dread growing. This was not a good development. Then, much to her growing distaste, the ninja stepped backward, melting into a mirror. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. Dodging the massive sword, Shino found himself in the hands of a cage bunshin who tossed him into the air. Flipping, Shino sailed clear of Zabuza and his weapon before landing heavily in front of a Mizu bunshin of Zabuza. Thankfully, he managed to create a spear of his bugs and send it through the man's head, creating a spray of water and thus reducing the number of Zabuzas down to one. Turning, the Aburam spotted Naruto and his few remaining cage bunshin trying to hurt the man. After Ino had taken off after Haku, things had degenerated. First, it had been semi-even between himself and Naruto. They'd been pushing Zabuza, and then the man had created those Mizu bunshin, which thankfully had been weaker than normal due to the lack of water. Still, The plan had fallen apart, and Shino would be more hindrance than help in a direct assault on the sword-wielding ninja, not that Naruto seemed to care. The blonde was throwing all sorts of wind jutsu at the man, taijutsu combinations, and even a few underhanded tricks. The sad truth was, no matter how much Naruto tried, Zabuza always managed to scrape through with as little damage as possible. Suddenly Zabuza brought his sword around, slicing the last few Kage Bunshin down and coming within inches of gutting Naruto, but Shino's bugs moved on their own and formed a Kikai Bunshin to absorb the blow and allow Naruto to retreat. Maybe Shino couldn't actively help with the fight, but he could cover Naruto as best he could. As the orange-clad ninja regrouped and made yet more Kage Bunshin, Shino silently guided his Kikai to key locations on the man's body, replacing those already present. Shino had devised the tactic after the start of the fight in an attempt to drain as much of the man's chakra as he could. So far, the man had seemed unaware of the drain, but Shino had a limited amount of Kikai left unaffected from the exposure to the water. Zabuza seemed to be growing more agitated as Naruto and his clones resumed the fight, and with a sudden blur of movement, the clones disappeared in puffs of smoke, and Naruto crashed to the ground at Shino's feet from a kick to the face. Shino, however, was eyeing the man who had struck a weird pose while glaring at them. It seemed to take a matter of seconds before the air was thick with a mist from nowhere. "Fan out!" Naruto shouted, leaping to his feet, his breathing abnormally loud in the sudden hush, blood trailing from his mouth and scalp. "8 choices," a disembodied voice whispered from nowhere while Shino strained to see. "Kidneys, heart, liver, lungs, spine, clavicle vein, neck vein, brain." Shino frowned behind his high collar, wondering what he could do. His bugs wouldn't be able to notice anything in time, and he couldn't dissipate the mist, it was laced too heavily with chakra. Even Naruto's wind would have a hard time, and he made a motion to the on-edge boy not to try what he was obviously thinking about. "You guys aren't bad," Zabuza taunted, still hidden in the mist, "but I'm the demon of the mist, expert in silent killing." "You're an eyebrow-less freak," Naruto shouted, heatedly, and hands coming together, unleashed a surprisingly strong blast of wind. It actually swirled the mist and forced it to part at least within close vicinity of them. Shino spotted it first and grabbing Naruto yanked him down as Zabuza's massive sword slashed through the space they had both just occupied, and then his world blurred, almost making him retch as a shunshin carried them further away from the man. Coming out of it, he found Naruto kneeling next to him, bleeding and glaring. Looking at Zabuza, who sported little more than a few shallow cuts, Shino realized just how matched they were. "You're fast, ain't you?" Zabuza said, sword coming to rest on his shoulder, "but I'm going to kill you." "Hey!" Naruto shouted indignantly as he suddenly charged 50 Kage Bunshin emerging from thin air and began throwing explosive kunai. "That's our plan." Ino knew when she had first seen Haku's trick with the mirrors to expect the worst. However, she still had no way of preparing for the assault that had followed. The numerous Hakus had lifted their hands, holding senbon needles, and suddenly the air was full of flying weapons. They were moving at a speed that Ino could only register shadows of movement, and it took all of her skill to deflect the ones aimed at her vital points. That had been the pattern for the last few minutes, her continuously deflecting the needles, praying for a moment's break, wondering how in the hell this technique worked. Then suddenly there was a lull in the assault, and the boy stared down at her from all sides, giving her the chance to attack. Ino took it and channeled the chakra along her sword, hurling a tornado toward the mirrors. Sadly, it failed to have the desired result, her chakra was too low to do any damage to the mirrors, and she realized how stupid she had been for using so many powerful moves early in the fight. Her only option now was to figure out the secret to this jutsu and then kill the boy. A hail of needles came at her from all sides, but Ino nimbly deflected them while watching the reflections in the mirrors, knowing Haku had to be changing mirrors rapidly since that was the only explanation. "Trying to follow me with your eyes, you will never be able to cope," the boy said from over the mirror overhead, while the numerous reflections lifted their senbon needles in sync. "How the hell are you moving so fast?" Ino shouted, deflecting the incoming attack, desperately seeking the chance to attack, but not finding it. "This jutsu is unique to me," Haku admitted, pausing once more. "I use the mirror's reflection to travel, to me you appear to be moving in slow motion." Ino felt her breath hitch, her eyes widen. The way he had said that unique to me, the way he described the move, it sounded like an advanced bloodline of some sort. Her hopes of overcoming it suddenly seemed to disappear, and then she noticed something. He was talking a lot more, and the mirror she had attacked was still cracked. That raised a red flag in her mind, common sense suddenly screaming at her. With the small amount of water that would be available from the rain last night, he had to be using an ungodly amount of chakra to hold it all together. She could outlast him if she did, as Kakashi had taught her for the Chunin exams and relied on her sixth sense to survive. Still, Haku traveled at unbelievable speeds. He was actually attacking from all sides at once after all, and Ino was hard-pressed to defend herself. Not that Ino could or would give up, but the fact was she was helpless. Her chakra was low, her stamina was not enough to get her through this, and her blade was slowing just a little bit from fatigue. Deflecting a flurry of needles, as best she could, Ino could feel the early signs of exhaustion setting in. He paused to talk again, and Ino frantically applied her mind to the problem, desperate for a solution. The mirrors were obviously beyond her ability to destroy with her low chakra. Defending was getting her nowhere, except dead slowly. He moved too fast for her to disrupt his attack, but her only option was just that. Killing him while he attacked her, but the problem was how? Then she remembered the jutsu Naruto had taught her yesterday, a jutsu she had mastered by killing his cage bunshin with a massive heart attack. A jutsu forever linked to the look of surprise on his face as he died. Kanashibari no jutsu was her only choice, but there was still one last problem: how to slow Haku down long enough to hit him with it. A moment later, Shinobi Rule 58 flashed through her mind, and Ino knew the answer. Victory sometimes comes through defeat. An unnatural calm stole through Ino. She knew how to win now. It was just a matter of keeping it from looking obvious. Dodging instead of deflecting the next hail of weapons, Ino made a lunge for the mirror the boy was in. It was a serious gamble on her part, her reflexes against his accuracy and speed. The senbon needle struck her dead to rights in the chest, and she jackknifed from the blow to land spread eagle on the ground. There was a moment of silence, and then the sound of the mirrors cracking before they shattered. The sound of feet connecting with the ground filled the damp air. You never had a hope of defeating me. Your kenjutsu could not destroy my ice, and you could not move fast enough to catch me. A second later, he jerked in surprise, his body folding from an unseen impact of chakra, while Ino had managed to sit up quickly. Breathing heavily, using an arm to support her, she watched as he stumbled back before collapsing with a dull thump. Gathering her energy, Ino carefully regained her feet and stood stooped shoulder for a moment, then retrieved the kadachi she had dropped in that last attack. Pausing, she straightened up, then grasping the senbon pulled it free with a soft grunt. Looking at the blood-covered needle, she tossed it aside, grimacing in pain as she sheathed her sword. Okay, so that was not the most brilliant idea she'd ever had, but at least she was alive. Thankfully, her reflexes had been better than his speed and accuracy, allowing her to twist her body just enough to avoid taking a serious hit, but from the feel of it, she'd cut it awfully close. Even more thankfully, the bandages around her upper body had absorbed some of the blow. Feeling a moment of pride, she looked at the now dead boy and grimaced, but still she was proud this had not been an easy fight for her. Still, Ino had to say it, because now that the fight for her life was over she couldn't help it. You talk too damn much like Sasuke, by the way. After another moment she turned, heading back toward the rest of her team. Naruto shot in, ducking the massive blade as it swept overhead and spun around with a hammer fist toward the man's ribs. Sadly, it was like trying to fight Anko. This bastard could react faster than Naruto could attack. Zabuza stepped back and dropped his sword in a sharp chop. Naruto quickly threw himself into a left shoulder roll and sprang to his feet as two clones grabbed and threw him completely to safety. Landing, he spun, the clones buying time as best they could. This fight was not going well, and Naruto knew it. He should have been able to handle this. Instead, Zabuza was tearing him to shreds, slowly, and Naruto was beginning to doubt his own skill. He quickly banished that, after all, Zabuza, while powerful, was still taking some damage. It was just that in comparison Naruto was taking the worst of it all, and that grated against a boy worse than anything, and he was determined to change things. Raising his fingers, Naruto created a few hundred cage bunshin and sent them after the guy, who seemed to be growing more pissed off with each passing second. Glancing left, he spotted Shino, who was silently guiding a wave of Kikai to attack the man from behind. Seeing his teammate, Naruto thought about Ino and wondered if she had managed to win against her enemy or not. Creating another cage bunshin, he sent it on its way to find out, his heart almost in his throat at the thought of her lying dead in the forest. No, not Ino, and not on his watch. This fight ended now. Naruto returned to the fight with renewed vigor. It was sheer chaos weaving and dancing his way through the cage bunshin, using them as cover and distraction. Explosive notes were going off right and left, massive amounts of exploding kunai and shuriken, and it all proved utterly pointless as Zabuza finally got a bead on him and swung that massive weapon around to take his head off, destroying several cage bunshin in the process. Naruto ducked under the blow, much to Zabuza's obvious confusion, then sliced a kunai across his stomach. The missing ninja grunted at that, lashing out, but Naruto dodged that as well and drove the kunai into the shoulder at an angle. Zabuza actually yowled in pain, but pivoted, catching Naruto alongside the head with a knee that sent him tumbling away. Face livid, Naruto regained his feet with a sway and turned dismayed that the man was ripping the kunai out of his shoulder with a demonic ferocity. Still, that should at least slow the damn sword down a little bit. A moment later Naruto dodged the kunai by hair's breadth, followed by the massive weapon that came around faster than ever. Shino came to the rescue with a massive spear of bugs that clashed against the blunt side of the sword and gave Naruto time to put some space between him and Zabuza. Kami the guy should have been slower or more reserved, he was wounded after all, but instead the guy just got more enraged. A cage bunshin tackled Zabuza from behind, but he elbowed it in the face, then chopped another two in half and kicked another in the face. Naruto, my Kikai, has drained as much chakra as we could from this man, Shino said, moving to stand beside him, his voice strained and his shoulder sagging. Perhaps now would be a good time to retreat. Can't, Naruto panted, trying to blink blood out of his eye. He'll just come after us. I gotta finish this here, and now, I already have one psychopathic sword user after me. Naruto was only vaguely aware of Shino retreating, but it didn't matter. Nothing mattered other than the simple fact that Naruto had finally decided to kill his enemy. He even had a plan, and it was amazing how simple everything became when he focused entirely on killing his enemy. In unison the various cage bunshin disappeared, and Zabuza turned to stare him down. A moment of understanding seemed to pass between them, no more games, no more dancing around it. It was time to get down to the serious business of killing each other. Zabuza spun his sword quickly and drove it into the ground, his fingers beginning to form a rapid and long string of hand seals. Naruto gathered as much chakra as he could and formed a Tora seal. Suiton, Suryuiten no Jutsu. Zabuza shouted, the air around him rippling before the moisture exploded and joined into a massive column of water in the form of a dragon hurling at him. Fton, Datapa, Naruto roared, the now dry wind, before swirling with an ear-splitting roar as it clashed against the other technique. The clash of techniques raged for a moment before the wind tore through the water dragon, forcing Zabuza to use his sword as an anchor. Still the man and weapon slid several feet, leaving a deep gouge in the earth. It was hardly over as Zabuza yanked his sword free and spun it before bringing it down, the air rippling before a spiraling blast of water shot out once more. Naruto met this with his wind, using the Kei's no Yaiba. As the two techniques clashed, decimating much of the surrounding area, Zabuza shot forward. Naruto quickly created another Kei's no Yaiba, which Zabuza defended against by using his sword as a shield, which resulted in little more than the sword being sliced deeply several times. It was not enough, however, to deter the man who reached Naruto in a matter of seconds, his sword coming around swiftly. Naruto dodged back, a second too slow, his arm receiving an ugly cut from the tip of the blade. Swearing, Naruto performed a shunshin backward and skidded to a halt, glaring at his attacker. Producing a kunai in each hand, Naruto shot forward with a series of shunshin attacking from every direction. Metal rang against metal as Zabuza defended against his onslaught until Naruto found his opening and, using the Hibi style, ducked a slash at his head and came up on the inside of the man's guard. A kunai to the ribs, too shallow to kill, Naruto planted a foot against a man's leg and jumped backward into the air, avoiding the retaliation. Twisting, Naruto came around, sending not only the last kunai he was holding, but the one strapped to his forearm, heading for the man. They were deflected deftly with the massive sword, but that was fine. Landing with a flip, Naruto sprang away and then rebounded from a tree, charging back at the man. Zabuza spun his weapon overhead, then brought it down sharply before him and charged as well. They met halfway between them. Zabuza made his thrust and Naruto, using the Hibi, dodged, attacking from his left side with a jumping punch to the face. It connected, but only as a glancing blow, and Naruto had to grab the man's head with his hand and hurl himself over. Landing, he shot away with a shunshin and pivoted, turning to face the man. Despite appearances, this guy was freaking strong, and he could take some serious damage. Naruto could too, of course. His arm was burning slightly, but he knew without looking that the cut was healing rapidly. Then he noticed that the man was resting his massive sword across his shoulders, staring at him in a way that did not bode well in Naruto's opinion. That was when Naruto looked down to discover his jacket was almost completely ruined. Apparently, he had been slightly off in his dodging of that weapon. The entire right side of his jacket was now gutted. That wasn't what got him though. The orange material was darker than it should have been, which meant that Naruto was bleeding. Nothing life-threatening, for him at least, but Naruto would have sworn he had dodged that weapon completely. Looking back up, he narrowed his eyes on his opponent, who started laughing in a tone that sent a chill even up Naruto's spine. Fury overtook him though, and he clenched his fists, knuckles popping loudly in the air. "What the hell are you laughing at, you freak?" "Nothing," Zabuza said snidely, the sword coming around to point at Naruto steadily. "It's just that you seem to have a bloodline like Haku. It's been a long time since I've had to fight a bloodline, so I'm laughing at not seeing it sooner." "Heh," Naruto said while silently preparing to attack at the first opportunity. "I'm Uzumaki Naruto, the future Hokage, not a bloodline. You can worry about being Hokage after you survive," Zabuza said before disappearing from view in a blur of speed. Naruto felt his instinct scream at him, and he dropped to the ground as the massive sword slashed overhead from behind him. Using his hands, Naruto spun over, planting a kick firmly to the man's shin, and then performing a backflip, another to his chin. Landing smoothly, Naruto surged his chakra and leaped back as the massive blade swung around at a speed that was near invisible. Zabuza was on the offensive once more, and before long Naruto was doing his damnedest to avoid getting any more cuts. Still, no matter how much he hurt this eyebrow-less freak, it didn't slow him down. Naruto was also aware that their height and weight made a difference as well. Naruto's blows were just a tad lighter than they should be because of it. If he had been fighting anyone remotely near his own height, he should have been able to do much more serious damage. That kick to the shin, he knew, would have laid out Kiba, but with Zabuza, it was little more than a tickle apparently. Sidestepping a particularly brutal downward chop, Naruto prepared to launch a counterattack, only to catch a front kick to the solar plexus, which drove the air out of his lungs and launched him backwards. Luckily, Anko had hit him there before several times, so he learned quickly how to focus through the air and lack of air. Hence, instead of being a helpless target, he rolled with the momentum when he hit the ground and sprang to his feet, his breath already returning in sharp stabs. Zabuza thankfully was caught up trying to avoid a sudden massive wave of bugs. Naruto felt a flash of annoyance toward Shino for interfering, but instead took the time to begin forming his Rasengan. One hand to supply the chakra, the other rapidly striking it to give it form, and then looking up he fixed his gaze on his enemy who was turning to face him. Naruto let a low growl escape as he started forward in a stumbling but dead run, bringing his arm with the Rasengan back, his concentration at its zenith. Zabuza waited until Naruto was within range and then twirled his massive sword overhead before bringing it down in a vicious and powerful downward chop. It was a feat that Naruto was not conscious of doing, but suddenly, realizing he could not move fast enough to avoid the blow, he performed a shunshin to reach inside the man's guard before he could complete the motion. Zabuza's eyes went wide. Naruto appeared in a crouch, snarling, as he drove his Rasengan forward into the swordsman's sternum. The air filled with the sound of rushing wind, cracking bones, and then a meaty tearing. Blood splattered Naruto's face as the man lifted off his feet, sword falling uselessly aside, and was sent hurtling 50 feet away into a massive tree that snapped from the impact. Zabuza's body arched from the blow. The man stood erect for a moment and then collapsed lifelessly face first to the ground. Naruto slowly stood up from the crouch, arm falling absently to his side. Taking a deep breath, he let it out and turned to find Shino approaching cautiously, and it took Naruto a moment to force his bloodlust aside and offer a faint smile to the boy. "I didn't need your help." "That was," Shino started, uncertain, then shook his head. Keiko-chan acted on her own. "She says that she thought it best to help you out since we are all on the same team." Naruto managed a grunt, not knowing really what to make of that. He knew that Keiko was a bug that Shino spoke with a lot, it was just something that came up among them, but this was the first time he'd heard of her having an actual personality. Well, he did suppose that, if she could talk then she would have to have a personality, but still. Well, thanks Kikyo-chan. She says you are welcome, Shino said in that monotone way of his. So what did you think of that move? I can't wait to tell Iro-senin that I used it to take down an A-rank missing nin. Naruto gloated, leading the way to the dead body, where he began searching for items. It was impressive, Shino admitted the amount of concentration had to be very high. I am also impressed that you managed to use a shunshin in conjunction with such a move. However, you seem far too carefree after such a battle. Whatever, Naruto muttered, pocketing the money on the man along with a few notes and one sealed scroll. Then after some deliberation, he took the scratched forehead protector. We should move to locate Ino and then return to Otofuku-gai, Shino said. By now Tsunade-sama will have spent all of our money and will be preparing to leave soon. Right, Naruto said, looking at the body before creating several cage bunshin. Naruto? Even an eyebrowless freak deserves to be buried, Naruto muttered and then walked over to the massive sword, considering it. The blade had survived the Kei's no Yaiba, yes there were deep cuts on the outer edges, but for the most part it was untouched. Kneeling he produced a sealing scroll that he had left over from training with Iro-senin along with his pen and the chakra lace stink. A few deft movements later to mark both the scroll and weapon, and Naruto was ready. Channeling the chakra into his hand, he placed it on the scroll activating the seal. Anayufuin-huin. There was a pulse as the seals on the scroll and the sword glowed, then with a gentle glow, the sealing was complete and Naruto was binding the scroll carrying the sword shut. Standing, he pocketed it and grinned at Shino, now let's meet up with Ino-chan. Tsunade frowned, dropping her coins into the machine and yanking the arm. The Sannin watched the wheels spin for a moment, then looked around the parlor. It was well lit, giving the decor a nice warm look, complementing the polished wooden panels and the strikingly colorful paintings on the wall. The place was new, or at least it was new since the last time Tsunade had been through town, and packed. Large, brightly painted machines lined every available surface along with small tables, and the room was crammed with people at the machines, shouting in victory, cursing in defeat, and employing odd body language in an attempt to win. It was the kind of place that not too long ago, Tsunade would have enjoyed, even if she did lose the shirt off her back, which had happened only once, when she had foolishly agreed to play strip poker with Jiraiya and Orochimaru when they were younger. Now though, she found it rather boring, and the medic wasn't sure why. It could have been the lack of Shizune or Taunton. Maybe it was because she was now responsible for taking care of people and didn't have the energy to be selfish. Most likely, it was because she was still holding the necklace and the guilt associated with it. She hadn't been able to confront Naruto, she had been surrounded with cage bunshin all day after all. Nicely created and very convincing cage bunshin of Shino, Ino, and Naruto, but Tsunade was a Sannin. She wasn't sure why Naruto would do such a thing, even to avoid her, it seemed stupid to replace all of them, and the only thing she could figure was they were training. Looking back at her machine she sighed, another loser. She checked the Ryu the cage bunshin had given her for the chance to apologize for messing up, she found it gone. Just as well, the beautiful woman decided they needed to get on the road and head to Crater City and then get back to Konoha. Getting up she started for the entrance, only to pause at the sound of someone hitting the jackpot. Eye twitching she turned to find some wrinkly old hag sitting at her machine, money pouring out into the tray. Her first instinct was to explode and take the money, but she restrained herself seeing the old hag share a kiss with an equally wrinkled old bastard. Snorting in annoyance, the legendary sucker left cursing her continued bad luck. Sometimes she really did believe that, if it wasn't for her bad luck, she wouldn't have any luck at all. The sun made her squint, she had spent too much time indoors gambling, but she kept walking back toward the inn. The cage bunshin had promised to wait there for her, since they didn't want to ruin her fun. Tsunade figured that the real Team 10 could change with their counterparts quickly, hopefully without letting her know they had ever been gone. The only reason she had allowed the farce to keep going, besides blowing all of their money gambling, was the fact that she kept expecting that boy from last night and his partner to come after her. The longer those three were out of her way, the easier things would be for her to deal with when the fight happened. Sadly, neither had shown up all day, and she had decided to gamble while waiting. Clearing the gambling district she turned left and headed down the road to her inn the people of this city, and truly being ingenious in the layout. The gambling district and the pleasure district surrounded the inns and normal shopping area. Tsunade could remember Ino's reaction when they had wandered from the weapons shop and into the pleasure area. It had been priceless to see the girl's face turn bright red and her eyes to grow as big as saucers. Shino hadn't reacted, which had made Tsunade wonder if maybe he wasn't gay. Then she considered the fact that there had been enough flesh for both male and female to enjoy, so she considered the possibility that he just wasn't interested in sex, period. The most obvious answer, though, was that he was an aburum and hence showed very little reaction to much of anything, including attractive women offering him good times for discounted rates. Reaching the inn, Tsunade paused, finding the three ninja already waiting for her. Naruto's hair had a reddish tinge to it, his jacket almost in tatters. Ino stood nearby, her top darkened around a tiny hole near her chest, but there was no mistaking her confident look. Only Shino appeared no different. Approaching the three, wondering what had happened, because there was no way any of that was from a training session. "Hey Baba," Naruto said, his voice bright as he held up a scratched mist forehead protector. Mamachi's Abusa. A rank missing nin. Demon of the Mist. Member of the Kiri no Shinabigatana Nananan Shu. Dead. Tsunade blinked then, as the full knowledge of what he was telling her sank in, she felt her eyes widen. These three, had killed Zabuza? The Demon of the Mist? No way, no fucking way, but the evidence seemed to support the story, and she could only stare at them in silence before recovering. "What, are you expecting a parade?" "No," Naruto said, ignoring her biting sarcasm, as he put the forehead protector up, "just letting you know." "Whatever," Tsunade mumbled, then staring at him for another moment tossed the necklace at him. He caught it, of course, startled, and then his eyes darkened slightly. "What are you?" "Shut up and listen," Tsunade said curtly, cutting him off. "I'm over 50 years old. I've survived 2 wars, lost friends and family, some because of my own mistakes. I'm not going to change my opinion about heroes or Hokages." Obasan Ino started to object before Tsunade held a finger up to silence her. "However," Tsunade said, her gaze not wavering from Naruto's, "that the necklace doesn't belong to me. Not anymore. It's a curse you inherited from the previous Hokages and 2 heroes. For better or worse, it's yours." "Huh?" Naruto asked blankly. "All of them," Tsunade said, her tone growing sad. "Were just like you. That's why that cursed necklace belongs to you now, why it's your curse. When you die, it goes with you." Tsunade saw the understanding in his gaze, the appreciation, and she snorted, pushing past them silently. The others followed, and suddenly Tsunade wished she had more money and a few more hours to kill in the gambling district. "Yeah. Ramen?" Naruto cheered as they came within sight of the village gates. Ino smiled slightly, but otherwise ignored her teammate, much as Shino did. Tsunade pinched the bridge of her nose and shouted for him to shut the hell up. "Boy, why don't you shut up, Baba?" Naruto countered, looking at her with a bright smile, the necklace she had given him around his neck. "What did you call me?" Tsunade grated out, left eye twitching. "Sorry," Naruto said mockingly, "I forgot how old you were. I called you Baba." "Runt," Tsunade shouted back, smashing a fist into the ground where he had been standing a split second before. "I'm going to kill you." "Nayuwaha," Naruto taunted, while Ino and Shino signed off to the side before nearly being turned into a pincushion from a hail of kunai. Naruto. Whipping around, the blood drained from his face as he spotted the fearsome woman known as Anko. "Hey Anko," Naruto gulped, eyes whitening. "We need to have a little talk," Anko said sweetly, twirling a kunai around a finger. "About you making this village think I would run around naked shouting that I love people." "It was just a joke," Naruto said, edging away from her. "A joke?" Anko asked sweetly, too sweetly, to be safe. "You had a naked clone of me make out with Kurenai in public." Naruto suddenly bolted amid a hail of sharp deadly weapons, the insane woman known as Anko chasing after him. Curiosity, it was said, killed the cat. It had been a favorite saying of the orphanage workers to caution curious children. It worked majority of the time, except on the most curious. Uzumaki Naruto could be counted chief among them. No matter how often he got hurt, he came back even more curious. Curiosity may have killed the cat, but satisfaction had brought him back. That described Naruto perfectly then and now. It was one of his defining traits, the reason why he could learn under Anko. His curiosity kept bringing him back to her and kept forcing him to try and figure it out until he had it. His need to know was unquenchable, and this was why, instead of doing, as other teens might, and seeking out others, he had isolated himself. Because he was curious about the K's no Yaiba and his own, self-created move Kamikaze no Yaiba. He had been using it for a while without really thinking about it, but after the last few hours training he had realized it was a devastating move. He wasn't sure how the ranking system worked, but he placed it as A rank and not something to use around allies. After that, he had tried forming a traditional sword of wind, but that sadly had failed, but a spear had worked. Which had led to brief efforts of experimenting with the Futon, Datapa that had resulted in the creation of a brief shield of wind and a whirlwind under his feet to aid his jumps. It was amazing what he was discovering and how much chakra he was using up, yet with each discovery he filled up just a bit more of the battered scroll he was using. The scroll, which had been discarded by the original owner years ago, was nothing special. It was merely a scroll Naruto had retrieved in his magpie-like tendencies and the first thing he had grabbed before setting out to train. It was the reason he had the scroll that made it special. Ever since learning the Rasengan, Naruto had been thinking about family. Hence, the scroll, every technique he came up with, he wrote drowned, all on the off chance that he ever had a family. It was, in essence, his way of creating a heritage for any possible children, so that, if he did die, they would not be without a family history. They would have something of his and not have to suffer or struggle like he had. Pulling the scroll into his lap and picking up the pen nearby, he paused, scanning the list of jutsu so far listed, and described. Rasengan, Kage Bunshin, his version, which Jiraiya said was different than everyone else's, Sexy no Jutsu, and how to do the variations, K's no Yaiba, Kamikaze no Yaiba, Futon, Datapa, K's no Yari, K's Toku, and the few seals that he had learned from Jiraiya. Jotting down a few minor notes on the K's Toku, he sighed, then looked up at the sky. It was about lunchtime, and Anko had told him that morning to make sure and be at the Hokage's office at noon. Something about an important mission Anko had arranged for him, probably as a reward for bringing back those scrolls of Zabuza's that dealt with unity. Shrugging, he finished his notes and then, closing the scroll, stretched before grabbing his Chunin vest. As happy as he was to be a Chunin, he was not thrilled with the vest. Sadly, since his last remaining jacket had finally fallen apart after the Zabuza fight and the store that had sold them was destroyed by Unity, he was forced to improvise. One dark blue, mid-length sleeved shirt sporting a Konoha symbol, orange pants, and a Chunin vest later, he had a new temporary outfit. Slipping the scroll into one of the pouches of the vest, he set off at a brisk pace toward the village. Maybe if he had time, he'd see if Ino would like to get some lunch, but probably not. The girl was probably busy twirling her sword around, trying to catch up on lost training time. Which meant Naruto would just have to bug Anko, who had finally forgiven him for his prank or Iruka. He'd bug Shino, but the boy was already bugged enough. Chuckling at his private joke, Naruto picked up the pace, idly wondering what mission he and Anko would be handling. Yamanaka Ino felt good, because after so much time, she was finally able to practice her kenjutsu in peace. Of course, her elbow was still a tad stiff, but the more she moved her arm, the looser it became. Turning her body, she performed a low sweep of her kadachi, then curved it back up sharply. Her body flowed from stance to stance, guided by her own unconscious rhythm. Heights now Ino's style had no formal forms, it was created as the user moved. Spontaneous, like actual combat, unpredictable, like any life or death situation. To Ino, it felt like she was dancing to some invisible tune, and her body moved, as if that was true. Actually, if any male were present to see her form, they would have a nosebleed at some of her moves. Coming to a stop, with one last graceful slash, she twirled her kadachi and then returned it to the sheath strapped to her back. It had taken her a while to get the desired alterations, but now the sheath was hidden within the purple fabric. Tsukiha was even better than she could have imagined. Perfectly balanced, the blade gleamed almost unnaturally, and her chakra could flow effortlessly through the metal. It wasn't a weapon so much as it was a part of her, and finally being able to wield it had made her realize that she had been missing a part of her. Yamanaka Ino knew beyond a doubt that kenjutsu was her future. Smiling in self-satisfaction, she left the training field and moved back to the streets, thinking briefly of hanging out with Sakura or checking up on Shikamaru. After all, she and the shadow user had been friends when they had been growing up, but her plans were derailed by two individuals. One was a girl her own age whose name escaped Ino at the moment, and the other was a boy younger than her. Ino knew that the girl was another fangirl. The boy was a new one, though, but she had a feeling she'd find out what he was up to in a minute unless she fled quickly. Sadly, Ino was too slow, and both reached her at the same time. "Yamanaka Ino, right?" the girl asked cautiously. "Yeah. I'm Kase Yariman. We took the same flower arrangement course, remember?" "Right," Ino said slowly, blinking at her name. Yariman's parents must really have hated her, as if Kase wasn't bad enough. "I'm Kase J," the boy said excitedly. Ino paused, stared at him, then decided that, if Yariman's parents hated her, they downright loathed J. Kami, what kind of parents named their children, that sort of thing? In comparison to those names, Ino suddenly didn't seem like that bad a name. "So, anyway," Yariman said quickly, a grin on her face. "You're on the same team as Uzumaki Naruto, right?" "Yeah," Ino drew cautiously, knowing that some of the fangirls could get vicious. "You're friends, right?" Jay asked quickly. "Yeah." Yariman hesitated, then lowered her voice, leaning in. "Is it true that he's really huge?" Ino blinked, then blushed a bright red as the girl's meaning registered. Hell, Ino didn't even want to know how or where the girl had heard that. Honestly, was she trying to live up to her name? I don't know. "Never mind that," Jay interjected impatiently. "What's his favorite food? Where does he get his orange jumpsuits? Is he a good kisser?" Yariman asked excitedly. "I don't. Can he really do the Rasengan?" Jay added hopefully. "I guess. Is he dating anyone?" Yariman asked a little too forcefully to be casual. Ino couldn't help but rub her temples and bite back her groan of frustration. "Kami, why did it have to be her? Why couldn't Shino or Anko have to deal with this sort of thing? Does he prefer tempered steel kunai or iron kunai?" "Steel, duh." Ino said with a roll of her eyes. "I mean, do you enjoy having to resharpen every last one of your knives every single night? What kind of girl does he like?" Spotting more girls and boys hurriedly approaching, Ino actually whimpered. It was amazing to think that such a comfy-looking chair could be so uncomfortable. Shifting slightly, the masked Hokage let out an inaudible sigh. To his right, arms crossed, was the current Anbu commander, Tenzu. To his left, surprisingly enough, was the current leader of Root, Danzo. Sometimes it just didn't pay to get out of bed, Kakashi mused, closing his eyes. As if he wasn't tested enough just being Hokage, Kakashi now had 3 difficult tasks before him. One was restraining himself from killing the discovered, just that morning leader of Unity, Danzo. Because Root was loyal to the War Hawk before all others. Konoha needed Root, and killing Danzo would result in a loss of their specialized skills. Then there was the fact that this same War Hawk had managed to convince the council into pressing Kakashi, who had still yet to gain full authority, into assigning the 2 missions on his desk. One was a simple B-rank mission, and the other was, well, it was a mission Kakashi wished he could assign Anko instead of Naruto. Sadly, the choice wasn't his, but in another week he'd be free to assign high-ranked missions, as he, not the council, saw fit. Why had the Nidaime signed that law requiring a period of limited authority after a Hokage assumed office? Hadn't the man realized that he was, for 2 weeks, putting the Hokage under the thumb of the politicians? Hearing the door open, he opened his eyes and focused on the woman in the brown trench coat and miniskirt, then looked at the blonde in the chinin vest. Kakashi blinked, then reached up to rub at his eye. No, it wasn't an illusion. Naruto was actually wearing something normal. Marveling at the wonders before him, he waited for the door to close and the 2 ninja to stop in front of his desk. Taking a breath, he beamed at them, or, more correctly, his eyes curved up happily. "Afternoon." "Hi." "Yo." Kakashi chuckled to himself, then leaned forward, resting his hands on the desk. "Well, I suppose I should just get on with this, eh?" Selecting the first scroll, he tossed it to Anko, who caught it easily. "There you go, 1 rank B mission. Gonna have fun tonight," Anko muttered with a grin as she unsealed the scroll to check the details. "Oh, this really will be fun. So, what's the mission?" A high-ranking governor named Genji Bakai has recently been discovered selling Hai no Kuni secrets. We're not sure to whom, so the important thing is to stop the sales and find out which country is buying, Kakashi explained for the still-reading Kunoichi. It's rank B because Bakai has also enlisted the help of one Taoji Mizuki. He was being held in Hitachi, but recently disappeared. Now, however, he's acting as a bodyguard for Bakai's courier. "Mizuki?" Naruto repeated blankly before growling dangerously. "I thought that bastard was dead." "Well, He's not, and, as a former Konoha Chunin, he is ideally suited for the job since he has knowledge of our patrol system. But that's not your mission, Kakashi said, before tossing him the other scroll. This is… Huh? Don't open the scroll just yet. I need to explain a few details first, Kakashi said hurriedly as the boy moved to open it. Standing, he moved away from his chair and stared out the window over the village. This mission is not one I would have assigned you. However, due to your sensei's request, those of some members on the council, and a certain law, before I gain total command I am forced to assign you the mission. So what is it? An A-rank, solo assassination mission, Kakashi said calmly, turning back to the stunned-looking boy. This mission is very important to Konoha and the country. While Team Anko will be taking care of Mizuki, the courier, and the buyer, we need you to take care of Bakai. Wait, Naruto repeated blankly. You want me to kill one of our people? He stopped being one of our people, Kakashi said firmly without breaking eye contact, the minute he started selling our secrets to enemy nations. He's endangering the entire country and everyone within Konoha, along with running operations that are against every moral code imaginable. He has to be neutralized. But why me? Naruto asked, sounding more leery than upset. The why isn't important, Kakashi said firmly, forcing his voice to be level and not to glance at the ever-paranoid Danzo. It's your mission. Do you accept it or not? If I don't do this, Naruto said angrily, glaring at him. What, I get sent to that Hitachi place? Or do I have to worry about someone coming to kill me? Neither, Kakashi said, eyes narrowing. I promise you that, if you decide to refuse, I will not allow either to befall you. It merely means we reassign the mission, and you join Anko and the others. Naruto stiffened, then glared at the scroll in his hands. Kakashi wondered which way the boy would go, acceptance or refusal. Go with his team to stop an equally dangerous threat to Ino Kuni, or go on his own to stop the source. In the minutes it took for Naruto to stare at the scroll he was holding, Kakashi wondered which one he wanted Naruto to take. I'll do it, Naruto said, looking up, eyes hard. Very well. Dismissed, Kakashi said curtly, noting the ankle-like coldness in Naruto's tone. Naruto nodded, then, not glancing at Anko, rounded on his heel and stormed out of the office. Anko followed, a small scowl on her face. Kakashi, however, sat back down and stared at the now closed door, realizing that the Naruto that had just left was the same one from Fushimi. The boy that had just left his office had been a ninja trained especially for assassinations. Glancing at Tenzu, he noted the slight alarm on his face. Kakashi, however, turned his gaze away and to the battered red book sitting beside the white and red hat. He had just assigned a forced loyalty test on the most loyal person he had ever met. For some reason, he just couldn't bring himself to read his Icha book. Storming out of the Hokage Tower, coat billowing ominously, Mitarashi Anko paused in the street. Looking around, she frowned even more, then raised an eyebrow, wondering where the hell that runt had gotten to. A moment later, she spotted him, standing at the end of the street, leaning against a wall and glaring at the Hokage mountain. Walking quickly, she reached his side and crossed her arms. So. Anko looked over at him and raised an eyebrow, disturbed by his intent gaze. She wasn't used to seeing it, but she knew that look. It was her look right before she went off to an assassination, and, for some reason, she wasn't comfortable with it on his face. Why the hell do they want me to do this? Naruto finally asked in annoyance. This one? Most likely it's a loyalty test, Anko supplied it casually. A loyalty test? What the hell is that about? Every Chunin or above gets one. Part of the confirmation of rank, Anko said with a shrug. Usually, though, they're only given after some event that brings them into doubt. Well, why the hell are they giving me one? They probably want to make sure beyond a doubt that your loyal cause you defeated that Gaara punk. Still, it's not that strange, Naruto. I've had 20, and Kakashi even had 2. Huh, Naruto blinked looking at her. Why? I mean, well, yeah, stupid, as it is, I get why they made you do some. 20 is pushing it, though. But, why him? Wasn't he, like, Anbu commander, and now he's Hokage? He's gotta be loyal. First one was entirely political, Anko explained sourly, nodding for him to walk with her. See, he's got a Sharingan, but he's not an Uchiha. Well, one of his teammates was an Uchiha, and, when he died, they gave it to him. But, the Uchiha weren't happy with that story. Called his loyalty into question. That's stupid, maybe, Anko allowed, picking up the pace. But his team was made up of geniuses, the next set of Sannin, from what I remember. So, yeah, he had a loyalty test for that. Okay, so the other one? Bit more complicated, but it involves his other teammate, Rin. She was a semi-legendary medic by the time this happened, but she was caught performing some heavily forbidden medical experiments. What kind? No clue. At the time, I didn't care much about other people. Anko shrugged. Anyway, Kakashi was found with her, but he claimed that he was there to stop her. Rin was arrested and made to live out the rest of her life in the maximum security level of Hitachi, a level that has things even Oro-sensei would be leery of. Hell, he created a few of them too. Holy crap, Naruto said with a whistle. Okay, so I can understand the reason for that loyalty test. Yeah, it was pretty suspicious, Anko agreed, grinning. Anyway, it's not so strange, is it? No, Naruto allowed before snorting. So, would you ask for Kakashi to give me this mission? I didn't. Well, not this one exactly, but same thing, Anko allowed, waving her hand dismissively. Anyway, I wanted to do something special for you, since you got the promotion. So, I got you the mission, as my version of a Kaken. Kaken? Really? Naruto asked, startled. Wow. Well, thanks, I guess. You're welcome. So, you wanna help me out on how to freaking do this? I mean, we never covered assassination tactics. Good point. Okay, keep in mind, this is just a crash course, Anko said briskly, as he moved to the rooftops. Typically, you'll have two methods of entering a building, a door or a window. Sometimes, there's a secret passage, so you can use that too, and they can cut out a lot of crap if you can. Right, door, window, secret passage. Exactly. Now, if you use a door, don't enter immediately. Go to the side with the handle. Why? That's obvious, so when you open it, you can peek inside. Don't want to get killed without checking. Now, if you use a window, be casual. Stand beside it, then see if it'll open or not. If it does, then you climb in and crouch to see if anyone heard or noticed you. Right, Naruto said with a sharp nod. Now, those secret passages, apply everything from the windows and doors to them. Sometimes they can be traps, okay? So, there's one last way of getting in, and it's kinda cool. Basically, you have the guards open the doors for you. Huh? How do you manage that? Simple. Just get behind him without his noticing. Then follow him, staying out of his line of sight and not making any noise. When you're as far as you need to be, you take him out and then go on. Also keep in mind that you have to study the guards and the city itself. You can't go blindly charging around. Assassinations have to be done carefully. Unless you're ordered otherwise, of course. Check. Good. Now, then, more important things to keep in mind, Anko said with a pleased grin. Keep chakra used to a minimum, especially if you ever do this sort of mission out of country. I think you'll be fine. Bakai shouldn't have anything more than chnin if any, and very few can sense careful chakra use. Stick with the basics, water walking, and tree climbing, shunshin, and meskai. They don't produce an amount of chakra that someone other than a jnin would notice. Okay, I got all that, but what do I do once I'm inside? I'm getting there, Anko said, happy to see him so eager to learn. Performing a fancy flip, she landed gracefully on top of a building and turned to look at the blonde at her side. After you've checked things out in the city, come up with an escape route before going in cause once you're done or something goes wrong, you're gonna wanna get out of there fast. Got it, Naruto said, doing his own acrobatic move. Escape route for a fast getaway. Anyway, once you're inside the walls, find a safe point that can't be found easily, where you can rest or regroup if you need to. After that, move on. Stay away from places like barracks or dining halls, and crap. If anyone sees you, they have to be taken out. Duh on that last part, Naruto groused, good-naturedly. Yeah, well, I know you, Anko retorted with a roll of her eye, then turned serious. Now, as for the actual assassination, you're going to have a small time frame to do it and get out. So, no cage bunshin, in case you have to improvise. Also, you generally only have one shot, so go for the immediate kill and keep his mouth covered. Immediate kill? Thanks for watching my video, leave a like if you enjoyed my video and also do consider subscribing to my channel for more awesome content. If you want the next part of this story, let me know in the comment box. See you next time, till then sayonara.